God bless. He also said that, quote, we need to be smart, vigilant, and tough. We need the courts to give us back our rights. We need the travel ban as an extra level of safety.
Fox's Kristen Fisher. SpaceX has launched its first recycled cargo ship.
And liftoff. The 100th liftoff from Launch Pad 39A as Falcon and Dragon take flight to the International Space Station.
NASA Mission Control at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. The Dragon capsule made a space station delivery nearly 3 years ago. And as we said, this was its first recycled cargo ship launch. Fox News, fair and balanced.
Air Comfort Service Heating and Cooling. Weather.
The official FM NewsTalk 97.1 Weather Center forecast. It'll be warm and muggy tonight. We'll have partly cloudy skies, and we only drop to 72. We stay warm and humid tomorrow with times of clouds and sunshine. High will be 86. Look out for a shower and thunderstorm around during the afternoon and evening. Partly cloudy with a low near 70 tomorrow night. Very warm Monday with sunshine, but humidity drops. High 88. Nice Tuesday and Wednesday. I'm meteorologist Frank Strait for FM NewsTalk 97.1.
At Royal Gate Dodge Chrysler Jeep Ram, they're setting the stage with their Drive and Discover event. Sign and drive a new 2017 Ram Quad Cab 4x4 for only $229 a month, zero down, taxes included. Yes, I said zero down, taxes included. Visit Royal Gate in Ellisville, Missouri or Columbia, Illinois, just 5 minutes from South County, or at royalgatedirect.com. See dealer for details. Mention Psych with Mike and get the Royal Package at no charge.
Join 97.1 and Fast Eddie's at the first annual Bikes and BBQ Festival, presented by Sauce Magazine, June 24th at Liberty Bank Amphitheater in Alton, Illinois. Experience motorcycles, music, and the finest tasting barbecue from around the region. Plus an appearance from Dave Glover. The best part? Admission is free. The Bikes and BBQ Festival, Saturday, June 24th at Liberty Bank Amphitheater. Brought to you by Liberty Bank, Phillips 66, Coors Light, and Simmons Hanley Conroy. For all the details, go to 971talk.com. FM NewsTalk 97.1 presents Psych with Mike, with Michael Mahon. Brought to you by Royal Gate Dodge. Royal Gate Dodge Chrysler Jeep Ram, with the largest inventory of new Dodge vehicles in St. Louis. Visit them in Ellisville, Missouri or Columbia, Illinois. Online at royalgatedirect.com. This is Psych with Mike.
Good evening, St. Louis. Welcome into the Royal Gate Dodge Studios. This is Psych with Mike. I am here with my intrepid producer, Frank Ladd. How are you doing tonight, Frank?
Good evening, Mike. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Today was, I don't know if I should say remarkable day. I know what I should say.
You don't want to blow it up too big.
Exactly. But it was an enjoyable day. So I've got the Jeep taken apart, cut my grass, swam in the pool.
Jeep taken apart?
The top and the doors off.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
gotcha.
That's what I call taking apart.
Gotcha. I was like, what are we doing here?
Yeah. No, the pieces are strung
Crankcase
out
on the floor.
Absolutely,
right.
right.
No, okay.
Right, yeah.
Got the top off, the sides off, all the good stuff.
Had the Flintstones motor running where you got to put your feet out the bottom and push it. Yeah. And so it was just an incredibly enjoyable day, and then came in tonight to do an hour of radio, and I'm feeling more comfortable with that, and it just feels really comfortable, really nice. And I've said this to you off of the air, and I want to say this to you on the air. I can't imagine a better person to have begun this odyssey with, to be involved in this odyssey with than you. You have been absolutely remarkable and such a benefit to the show. Ken Williams, our engineer, also I want to put a shout out to him. You guys have been fantastic, and I appreciate everything you guys do for the show.
Thank you.
So I don't
I'm
know.
speaking for Kevin. Thank you.
Yes. Who is right now making icing flowers with my daughter. So that's also a very, very cool thing. So I don't know if you had heard this. I had retweeted this, but this week, Psych with Mike was actually acknowledged in an English online science journal.
That's fantastic.
Yeah,
people are paying attention.
The Psychology Daily. So I don't know how they heard about Psych with Mike, but what ended up happening is that they tagged Psych with Mike in a tweet that I then saw, and so said, "Oh, what is this?" and went to the site, and they had linked their site with Psych with Mike. So that is fantastic. And actually, now that I'm thinking about that, brings me to a point that I wanted to make. The difference between this show, hopefully, and other shows that say, hey, we just tell you the truth and all that, is that hopefully Psych with Mike actually does have an unbiased opinion that it is presenting that is based in logic and in scientific fact. And that's why we're being recognized by science journals and not political journals. But last week, obviously, we were talking about the idea of voter fraud, and we got some feedback, and I wanted to just kind of rehash some of that. So we had a guy who called and had said that he had gone to the, what do you remember? I thought it was a DMV, but it couldn't have been. No. It must have been the election board.
Election board, yes, over in Illinois.
Okay, that's what, all right. And the individual in front of him had been encouraged to vote. He had not, and he said that was 100% proof of voter fraud, and we obviously disagreed with that for a couple of reasons. Number one, somebody not telling you to vote is not voter fraud.
It's like somebody not saying "Have a nice day" as you buy something.
Exactly.
That's about what the comment was.
So if the person waiting on individuals in the store says "have a nice day" to the person in front of you, doesn't say "have a nice day" to you, doesn't mean that they're racist, doesn't mean that they're biased. It means that they didn't say that to you. Maybe you perceive that as rude, but it isn't indicative of any kind of political leaning or otherwise favoritism. And the second reason why we disagree with that is because a single event is not a statistic. And so another piece of feedback that I got from last week was that sometimes people perceive that the things that we say on this show may be trying to promote a liberal agenda. And that is certainly not my intent, to promote any agenda. And I have been very adamantly against the idea of a scientific basis for the concept of transgenderism, at least as far as psychology currently understands it. Now, I'm not saying that there isn't something that we don't understand, but that the idea that somebody at age 3 can say, I am a different gender, is not currently supported by the developmental theories of psychology that we hold as true today. And so I'm not saying that won't evolve. I'm saying that based on what we know today, that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. And so I'm not trying to promote an agenda. I'm trying to present ideas that are scientifically supported by what we know today, admitting that at some point in the future, we may know something different. At one point in human evolution, we believed that the earth was flat. We obviously don't believe that anymore. Things changed. I'm willing to accept that things may change in these cases as well. But when I talk about the transgender thing, a lot of people call up and say, well, I had a child and everything. And that's your experience is your experience, and I am 100% supportive of you being a good parent and treating your child however you would like, but it isn't indicative of a greater whole or a deeper understanding that the rest of society should ascribe to until it becomes better scientifically supported. So that's what we're trying to do on this show, and I think that we are doing a good job of that. Certainly anybody who wants to have a conversation with us or give us feedback, you can always do that on the phones, area code 314-969-9797, 866-455-9797. I am always promoting podcasting the show, podcasts like the Dickens. That is always a good thing to do. You can do that at my website, michaelmahon.org, michaelmahon.org, or of course at 971.com/shows/psych-Mike. That's hard to say all at one time. So what strikes you, Mr. Ladd, in the news this week?
Well, clearly, one of the big things that generated a whole lot of attention during the week was Kathy Griffin.
Yes,
People reacted far, left, right, everywhere. Everybody had a thought about Kathy Griffin, the now disgraced comedian.
I can only assume disgraced. Now, what is the future of that? I don't know.
Currently, she's lost quite a bit of work.
Yes, and deservedly so.
She is facing the repercussions of her actions.
Right.
Yes,
and that is the best feedback that I have heard. The best response that I have heard was Dave talking on the Dave Glover show about this, saying she is 100% within her rights to do what she did. She absolutely has a constitutional right to do it. But she doesn't have a constitutional right to not suffer consequences because of it.
Exactly.
And so she's suffering the consequences of her behavior. I don't care how liberal you are. I cannot imagine any rational kind of support that anybody could generate to support something like that. That is just a horrible act, and she deserves whatever she gets as a result.
And it was obviously, or it seems that it was obviously pre-planned and thought out, and it wasn't it was a staged photo.
Oh yeah.
There's thought and there's pre-planning to this. There's thinking about it. So there was some thought into this at some point. Clearly, it wasn't rational.
There was incredible planning.
Exactly.
I mean, it
was meant to stir the pot. Obviously, it was meant to be. Hey, look at me! I'm Kathy Griffin. I'm still here. There was meant to be attention drawn to her, and perhaps that thinking didn't get to the next step of, all right, what's the final repercussion of this? What happens next? What happens all the way down the road? And so it was swift and fierce.
Absolutely, and deservedly so, because the mannequin itself was incredibly lifelike, and then the blood dripping from it was very realistic. So there was a tremendous amount of planning that went into it. And my assumption is, and this is obviously dime store psychology, because I have not.
You've not met Kathy Griffin. You have never researched her. You have not talked with her. Right.
But she, my guess is, thought, I'm going to go out, I'm going to make this incredibly bold statement, and people are going to flock to me as a voice of the people, and I'm going to be able to stand in the front of the crowd and lead the revolt. And people will follow me because they can see just exactly how upset I am. And I think that there was an element to it, and they won't criticize me because I'm a woman. And I think that was a definitive part of her rationale for what she did, that she did it because she thought that people saw her as a sympathetic figure, and that would help cushion the blow, and it had exactly the opposite effect.
Maybe she thought she was going to get booked.
Well,
more places.
I'm sure that she did. And I also, psychologically, the thing about it that really bothers me is that this is an example when she goes on and hires an attorney and they hold a press conference and she talks about how it's never happened in the history of time that anyone's ever been persecuted the way that she has been, and everybody's against her. And they are, because she's wrong and she hasn't admitted wrong wrongdoing. She says, well, maybe I did act, impulsively, but she hasn't said I was wrong and I deserve to suffer consequences. I think if she could do that it would really, really mitigate a lot of this. But what I hate
coming
about
out
this,
with the lawyer and now saying that she's being bullied and everything else just kind of makes you think, all right, now just go away.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And the really unfortunate piece of it is that when people try and be emotionally manipulative, it feels kind of gross and scummy. Mm-hmm. People can feel that. And they say, okay, you're trying to manipulate me. Now, obviously, parents, when they're talking to their adolescent children, this is a little bit different. You a lot of times feel very sympathetic towards them. But in a situation like this, she's way overplaying the victim role. And the problem with that is that it makes it harder to then recognize real victims and to give them support because she's overplaying the hand so much. But now there's going to be a backlash. And when people actually are victimized, it's going to be harder for them to be able to get support. So we have Jim on the line. Oh, so we're going to give out the phone numbers. Thank you. Area code 314-969-9797, 866-455-9797. How are you doing, Jim?
I'm doing fine. It's good to have live radio on a Saturday night.
Oh, it's great to be live on a Saturday night.
Yeah, my question was, what kind of effect I heard little Barron Trump saw from out of nowhere, saw a picture of his father's head and all that, and I was just wondering what effect that had on him, if you had any opinions about is he traumatized or for good or temporary or anyway, could you talk about that?
Absolutely. Thanks for the call, Jim. That actually is a fantastic point and one that I hadn't thought of, but it is an excellent point. And yes, he is traumatized. Now, whether or not he's traumatized forever is obviously, or maybe not obviously, but is a result of whether or not people help talk him through it. Now, I'm assuming that these individuals all have access to really, really high quality mental health care. And so they'll get him in with somebody who will be able to really help him. But this is exactly what happened after 9/11. And so when 9/11 happened, we hadn't done a lot of research on the trauma of children prior to that. And so when 9/11 happened, the schools all brought TVs into the classrooms and they were showing the news footage because they thought that that would help the kids to understand what was going on and to recognize that this was happening in New York City or in Washington and that they themselves were safe. And what ended up actually happening was exactly the opposite. It had a horribly traumatizing effect because what we learned from that is that children don't understand that what's on TV isn't something that's happening. And so they saw the planes crashing into the Twin Towers over and over again, and they felt like that the events were being repeated over and over again in real time. And so it was actually re-traumatizing them every time that they saw it. So I don't know how much the young Trump actually was exposed to this or whether he was exposed to it over and over again. If he was, then that would reinforce the trauma. If he was exposed to it as a one-time event, yes, that's incredibly traumatic. Now, I'm not sure that he thought that that was his actual father. If he thought it was his actual father, then obviously that is incredibly traumatizing. Even if he didn't think it was his actual father, that kind of image is very difficult for a child to be able to understand and to be able to rationalize. This isn't real. This isn't actually happening. And so it is a traumatic event, and he probably is going to suffer as a result of it. But again, I'm sure that he has access to really, really high quality mental health care. And so he'll be able to get the help that he needs. That doesn't mean that he's not going to suffer as a result of it, but it means that whatever damage that has been done is going to be mitigated to the best of anybody's ability to do so. So that actually was a great question, Jim. I really, really appreciate that. I hadn't actually thought of that, but that is very good to know. So we are going to talk tonight a little bit about a couple of things. We are going to talk a little bit as soon as we come back from our first break about the idea of how our brains are wired and what we can do to rewire those. And that's going to lead us into something that we're going to talk about called emotional intelligence. So get us on the other side. Back in just a few minutes.
Follow Mike on Twitter at Psych With Mike.
Watch the Mark Cox Show live on the Granite Transformation Studio Cam at 971talk.com/Cox. Log on to our website or use your mobile device to join the daily live stream and watch the show. It's the Granite Transformation Studio Cam at 971talk.com/Cox.
Red Brick Roofing, wherever you live, from Bridgeton to Baldwin, Brentwood to Kirkwood, St. Anne to St. Charles, wherever you live. Hazelwood to Maplewood, the name you know. Red Brick Roofing, wherever you go. For a hole in your roof or a whole new roof. Red Brick Roofing.
St. Louis, 314-645-2000.
Frederick is the gold standard for roofing and perhaps priced a bit lower than other bonded and insured roofers. When you invest money into fixing a hole in your roof or putting on a whole new roof, you want the peace of mind that you'll get only with Frederick Roofing. Plus, you can always depend on an immaculate cleanup when the job has been completed by Frederick's own licensed and insured crews.
For a hole in your roof or a whole new roof. Frederick Roofing. Frederick Roofing, 645-2000.
The Financial Symphony is a show that blends the worlds of music and finance together in one harmonious package. It features your local financial maestro, Jerry Means.
A lot of advisors out there are mainly giving accumulation advice or looking at the growth through your working years. You really need to take a look at, is your advisor giving you advice on preservation and distribution?
That's the Financial Symphony with Jerry Means, Sunday mornings at 9 on FM NewsTalk 97.1.
At Royal Gate Dodge Chrysler Jeep Ram, they're setting the stage with their Drive and Discover event. Sign and drive a new 2017 Jeep Cherokee Latitude for only $299 a month. Zero down, taxes included. Yes, I said zero down, taxes included. Visit Royal Gate in Ellisville, Missouri or Columbia, Illinois, just 5 minutes from South County, or at RoyalGateDirect.com. See dealer for details. Mention Psych with Mike and get the Royal package at no charge.
We all know home inventory is low and demand is high, so you don't need to overpay because the market is not in your favor. At Vincent Mortgage, we have a better solution. Spruce up your existing home and make it the home of your dreams. It's very easy with a Vincent Home Equity Refinance. Just call 314-839-9999. That's 314-839-9999. Or chat live at vincentmortgage.com. NMLS number 225095, 12801 Flushing Meadows Drive, 63131.
Trending on FM News Talk 97.1.
Time to exit the Paris Accord.
I do respect this decision, but I do think it is an actual mistake.
Trump is falling down on the job.
Historic, monumental mistake.
Stay connected.
We will be environmentally friendly, but we're not going to put our businesses out of work.
This is
Make Our Planet Great Again.
FM News Talk 97.1. Younger, smarter, better.
Talk lines are open now. 314-969-9797 or toll free 866-455-9797. This is Psych with Mike
Welcome back into the Royal Gate Studios. We are back with Psych with Mike, and we're going to change gears and move on to something about rewiring the brain. And this was actually sent to me by Mr. Ladd, and I can honestly say that you have embraced the show. You send me things regularly. Everything you send me is interesting and quality, and we are going to get to those things as we can through the weeks because it's all really, really good stuff. But you sent me something I think this was 2 weeks ago, about rewiring the brain. And this is a really, really interesting topic because it dovetails very exactly with this concept of confirmation bias that we've been going over. Because for me, this is the essence of talk radio and the 24-hour media cycle, that everything has gotten so hyperpolarized that the ability for an individual to just find information that confirms an already held worldview is getting easier and easier and easier. So back when I'm old, and so back when I was young, there were only 3 TV stations. I guess actually there were 5 if you count 9 and 30, but there were 3 networks, and there were very limited avenues through which you could get the news. And the news was much more balanced, or at least we perceived it to be much more balanced. Newspapers were huge, and there was a need to actually corroborate and verify information, because if somebody came out and said, hey, that's wrong, and could prove it, you would have to retract information, and that actually made you look bad and less credible. And because there were so few avenues through which you could get information, people were always paying attention. Nowadays, there's so many different kinds of avenues through which you can get information that people can basically say whatever they want. You know, one of the things that I think is great about the internet is that you can get just about any information that you want. You can basically answer any question you have now just by pulling out your cell phone and accessing the internet, and it will give you an answer.
It has ruined the Cliff Clavins of the world.
It absolutely has. That's true, because Cliff always had a lot of information about subjects that nobody else cared about. Most of it was wrong, but nobody knew because nobody had the internet. So Cliff got to just say whatever he wanted to. And for those of you who aren't old like us, and actually Mr. Ladd is nowhere near as old as I am, but that's a Cheers reference. But we nowadays can access this internet and get information at the touch of a finger. But sometimes, maybe even a lot of times nowadays, that information is not necessarily correct. So what I tell my students is, when you are writing a paper, the one thing that I don't want to see is a reference to Wikipedia. Why not?
Because I wrote it.
Exactly. Well, you or 100 other people
exactly,
like you.
Yeah.
There is no verification, corroboration.
It's not real.
It's completely editable. Now, I'm not saying there's not good information on Wikipedia or that I've never looked at Wikipedia, and I tell my students, if the first thing you do is go to Wikipedia, that's okay with me, but then actually look for the reference material and go to the original source and actually investigate one step further.
I'm not going to a library. Come on.
Well,
Wikipedia is fine.
Yeah, sure it is. But if you're going to use Wikipedia as your primary source, then you're going to be using Wikipedia as your primary source. And that's the difference between this show and other shows, is that we're going to go to the source. So even though I may be giving you guys lots of articles on @Psych with Mike on Facebook or @Psych with Mike on Twitter, I'm always going to myself go to the source material. So I'm going to give you guys access to information that is easy for a layperson to be able to read and access and use in their lives. But I'm always going to go to the source information, and certainly I encourage anybody who would like to be able to do that to also do that. So you sent me this thing on rewiring the brain. It dovetails really nicely with what we were talking about with confirmation bias and the ability to just corroborate your own opinion. And what the article says in a nutshell is that you are going to begin to believe anything that you routinely practice saying to yourself. So if you practice saying to yourself, I am a no good so-and-so and my life is in the crapper, then you are going to eventually believe that. But the other side of the coin then is also true. And so this actually is a form of psychology called cognitive behavioral therapy. And the original proponent of this was a man named Albert Ellis. And back in the 1960s, he actually proposed what at the time was a fundamentally radical idea, and that was that if you practiced changing the language that you use to think with, that it would actually change what you believe and how you felt. So, for example, if your automatic thoughts are, my life is in the crapper and I'm a no good individual, then you are going to act in accordance with that belief. And you may not even be aware that that is what you are thinking, because most people don't actually try and identify what their unconscious verbal language is that they use to talk to themselves. Everybody talks to themselves. Some people are more aware of it than others, but everybody talks to themselves. You have to. There's no possible way that you can avoid that. And when you actually sit down and in quiet contemplation try and identify what the messages are that you are playing in your own brain, a lot of times what we find is that those messages are overwhelmingly negative. And the reason for that is because in human evolution, it's much more important to pay attention to negative information than it is to pay attention to positive information. So, for example, if you are living in a jungle, it's obviously much more important for you to see a wounded animal running across the jungle floor than it is to see a butterfly on a tree. And so because we are pre-programmed to pay attention to negative information actually has greater weight. So much so that when they do studies on this, what they find is that the weight of negative information outweighs positive information by about 5 to 7 to 1.
Is that why we see more negative stories on the news? Why we see stories that are a little more random and negative compared to positive and all over the place?
Yes, because we are
geared to focus on that.
To focus on the negative. And so the news channels all say, during sweeps weeks in May, every news station, or at least the large network news stations, always talk about how they're going to put more positive news on the air. And when they do that, what happens is that people switch off, because they're all interested in seeing the negative information, because that's what we oftentimes are attracted to, or are mostly attracted to. And so we have to then give ourselves 5 to 7 times more positive information to outweigh the weight of a single negative piece of information. That means if I sit down and I try and identify for myself what are the negative ways, the negative uses of language that automatically play in my brain, and I want to change that, and I put positive messages in my brain, that's a very effective thing. It will work. You have to be consistent with it, but you also have to do that more consistently than you're getting the negative messages, because your brain's going to pay attention to the negative messages much more closely, give them much more weight. So Vicky's on the line. We're going to ask her what she wants to talk about. Vicky, how are you?
Well, thank you. How are you, Mike?
I'm doing fantastic.
If we don't live in a vacuum, and so what you're talking about makes sense to me, but there are family members, maybe we aren't all blessed with family that's positive towards us and supportive, and when you are new at reinforcing yourself and giving those messages to your brain, then you may open up, you may feel more positive and talk to a family member who immediately cuts you down and takes that away from you. Do you have to do even more?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So that's actually a really, really good point, is that a lot of us grow up in families and we are indoctrinated, our families of origin indoctrinate the messages that play in our brain. And so it's usually adolescence or even adulthood before we ever have an opportunity to actually look at the things that we are telling ourselves with any kind of objectivity. And then if we decide that those things are negative or different than what we would like to believe, it takes a tremendous effort to be able to change that momentum. And if we are continuing to get negative messages from the family of origin, then we have to work even harder, because again, you have to put that positive message in your brain 5 to 7 more times than a negative message for it to start to equal out.
Okay, so let me ask you one more question.
Mm-hmm.
You had just said adolescence and, maybe even your 20s. I'm 50, and I've had my entire life being taught and indoctrinated with both parents and an adopted parent, saying that you are no good, you lie, you steal, you cheat, and none of that was true. And now I'm 50, starting to find myself kind of like a little flower surrounded by a bunch of weeds, and I'm trying to cut the weeds away and feeling the sun. It's really laborious.
Absolutely.
But I have no idea how it's possible to actually grow. Is it possible?
Well, yes, absolutely. So thank you, Vicki. You have a great night. So it is absolutely possible, but it is really, really difficult, and it requires a tremendous amount of consistency. And this is what I tell my clients all the time, is that it isn't that these things aren't possible. It isn't that these things can't work. It's that these things require consistency. It isn't even that they're necessarily hard. You just have to do them repetitively over and over and over again. And so you have to take responsibility for doing that. And as Vicki was saying, if you've gotten to a point in your life where you are, in your late 30s, maybe in your 40s or even in your 50s, and you're only now just starting to try and make that effort, then your consistency is going to have to be even greater to be able to outweigh the weight of all of the momentum from the messages that you've been getting all of your life. So let's pick this up on the other side of this break. Again, this is Psych with Mike, and you can get us on the phones at area code 314-969-9797, 866-455-9797. Be right back.
And instead of saying all of your goodbyes, let them know you life goes fast.
Talk lines are open now. 314-969-9797 or toll free 866-455-9797. This is Psych with Mike.
Keeping you informed and up to date.
Mr. Kushner has volunteered to share with Congress what he knows about these meetings.
The news and talk station for St. Louis.
What do the Russians have on Donald Trump?
FM News Talk 97.1. Younger, smarter, better.
If you collect guns, knives, or military memorabilia, you cannot miss the St. Louis Gun and Knife Show at the Machinist Union Hall this weekend. Over 170 tables featuring new and used firearms, ammunition, military collectibles, and more. From pre-Civil War to Vietnam. Friday 4 to 8, Saturday 9 to 5, and Sunday 9 to 3. Free parking, children under 12 get in free with a parent. Come early, the last show sold out. The St. Louis Gun and Knife Show this weekend at the Machinist Union Hall, 12365 St. Charles Rock Road in Bridgeton. StLouisGunShow.com.
Hey guys, Glover here for my friends at Zero Res Carpet Cleaning Company. So you are talking to not just the king, I am the master of procrastination, of justification. You give me a deadline and I will find a really good reason why to blow right through it. And you're probably similar. So you hear me talking about zero rest. You hear me talking about getting your carpets cleaned, how it doesn't just make them beautiful, but it makes them healthy because there's all sorts of nastiness that just filters down into that carpet. You need to get it done, but you find reasons. Hey, let's do it after the holidays. Let's do it after Memorial Day. Let's do it after Labor Day. Just put on the big boy pants, get it done. It's one of those grown-up things you need to do, and they do it great. They're in and out. They use the patented empowered water system, and you don't have to do it again for a really long time. Mention me, get 3 rooms for starting at $129, 314-474-2020, Zero Res, STL.com.
This is Congressman Lacey Clay inviting you to join me at my career fair, St. Louis's biggest and best jobs event. It's Monday, June 5th at Harris Stowe State University. Over 100 top employers are hiring right now, and they want to meet you. Doors open at 9:30 a.m., and it's all free. See you Monday, June 5th at Harris Stowe. For more information, call 367-1970 or visit lacyclay.house.gov.
At Royal Gate Dodge Chrysler Jeep Ram, they're setting the stage with their Drive and Discover event. Sign and drive a new 2017 Dodge Charger SXT for $239 a month. Zero down, taxes included. Yes, I said zero down, taxes included. Visit Royal Gate in Ellisville, Missouri or Columbia, Illinois, just 5 minutes from South County, or at royalgatedirect.com. See dealer for details. Mention Psych With Mike and get the Royal package at no charge.
You don't usually get a stock tip from a 16-year-old, but I'm here to tell you about a different kind of stock. It's called Better Futures, a stock for social change that's not about making money. Instead, you invest to help students like me go to college, which ends up making the future better for all of us. My name is Alicia, and I'm your dividend.
Invest in better futures with UNCF. Visit uncf.org/invest. A mind is a terrible thing to waste, but a wonderful thing to invest in. Brought to you by UNCF and the Ad Council.
There's some areas where Trump has been absolutely spectacular.
Mark Levin.
The regulatory area, on the Second Amendment, religious free speech, the Bill of Rights. Spectacular.
Mark Levin, weeknights 9 to midnight.
On FM NewsTalk
97.1.
Talk lines are open now, 314-969-9797 or toll free 866-455-9797. Now, more Psych with Mike on FM NewsTalk 97.1.
Welcome back into the Royal Gate Dodge Studios. So we're just going to go ahead and continue to talk about this idea of rewiring our brains. Obviously, it seems like people are interested in this subject, so let's just go ahead and finish it out tonight. There's still a lot, obviously, that can be said about this topic. And so when we left off before the break, Vicki was talking about, if you grow up in a family of origin and you've had a lot of influence from the family giving you messages about who you are and how you should think, and now you're an adult or even into your later years, into your 40s, 50s, or even later, then how do you do something like try to change those messages? So the first thing that you have to do is to analyze whether or not the messages that play in your brain are effective, good, and right if you agree with them. And so to be able to do that, this is what the idea of mindfulness is really all about. And so I'm not a huge fan of the term mindful just because it isn't really well defined in the clinical literature. So it's one of those terms like anxiety. It really doesn't have a very definitive clinical definition. And so it kind of means different things to different people. But ideally, mindfulness is about quieting your mind so that you can actually hear what's going on in the background. And so the idea would be, if you are being mindful, I know that on the Glover Show, probably if you listen to that, you've heard them talk about one day Mark was saying that running water was peaceful. And people were giving him a lot of trouble about, what do you mean running water? And there was a meme that got printed, I love water, but I really like running water. And it was an ongoing joke. And I had called in and said, actually, there is some scientific rationale for that. It has to do with the resonant frequency of the waves, and it does. So things that lull your brain into what are called a theta wave pattern of firing, the neuronal firing, is actually very relaxing, because that is what's called somnolence. So it is the stage of sleep that is between wakefulness and deep, deep sleep, which is delta waves. And so when you get into that place, then your brain is quieted and you have access to information that you don't otherwise have when everything's going on and your brain's a cacophony and you can't pay attention to any one thing. So the first thing that people have to do is to get themselves to a place where they're actually able to pay attention to the information that is in their brain and the thoughts that they are actually feeding themselves. So if you are interested in identifying some of your own negative self-talk, then that's the first step, is that you have to be able to quiet your brain so that you can understand what is the talk that is currently going on. Now, once you get yourself into a quiet state and you can start to identify what that self-talk is, then if you can identify that there's something negative, like, I'm a bad person, or people don't like me, or my life is bad, or whatever the negative self-talk may be, then what you have to do is say, okay, that isn't very attractive. That isn't flattering. It isn't what I want to believe. So I have to now become aware of when I am telling myself these things. So how do you become aware of when you are giving yourself negative self-talk? And the way you do that is by starting to be aware of what your own bodily functions are. So when you give yourself negative self-talk, what's not going to happen is that your body's not going to be able to feel good. So what you want to do is to try and become more mindful, if you will, but aware of when your body is uptight or tense. When your body doesn't feel good, I guarantee you that the reason that that's happening is probably because there's a lot of self-talk going on that probably isn't very positive. So when you can identify that your body doesn't feel good, then you can say to yourself, okay, I need to engage in a behavior to make myself feel better. I'm going to put positive messages into my brain. And eventually what you want to do is you want to get to a place where you're putting those positive messages in your brain routinely. You're choosing to do it. You may even actually be forcing yourself to do it because you want to be able to establish that consistency. So as you are starting to find that you are aware of what your body is telling you and that you are trying to put these positive messages in your brain, it's important to find ways of being able to be consistent. So when I'm talking to clients about this, what we do a lot of times is that we talk about, okay, write some positive self-statements down on a piece of paper. And a lot of times people will say, well, I don't know anything positive about myself. And so I will say, okay, well, this week, between now and the next time I see you, try and write down 3 positive self-statements, but you can't ask anybody else. And the reason for that is because if you ask somebody else, what ends up happening? You end up discounting that because you will say to yourself, what people say to me is, well, you'll never say anything mean about me. Well, and that's true. I'm not going to ever say anything mean to my clients. But what I tell them is, I guarantee you, I'm never going to say anything to you that I don't believe is true. So if I ever tell you something, then you know that it's because I believe it's true. You are correct. I won't say anything negative about you. So if I didn't believe this thing that I am telling you now, I would tell you something else that I did believe is true, but you're right. I won't ever say anything negative about you. So if I tell you something, then you can believe it's true. But even then, people are very, very reluctant to accept those messages. Now, eventually, what happens is that over time, when people are in therapy, they start to be able to feel more confident in the messages that their therapist are giving them. And the reason is because that's called reparenting. And so they allow themselves to start to treat the information that the therapist is giving them as if they were a child and their parent were giving them that information. That's what the whole process of reparenting is all about. But people can do this for themselves. So there's any number of ways that you can find the ability to put these positive messages in your brain. So the first thing is to try and sit down and figure out something that you like about you. Even if you can only come up with one positive self-statement, that is a very good start. Because if you can come up with one positive self-statement, you can reinforce that message in your brain through repetition if you choose to, all on your own. You don't need anybody else to do that. And if you can do that, then that message can start to have the same weight as any message that you've grown up with for your entire life. So eventually, when I'm working with clients on this, we end up trying to come up with more statements. And the more statements that you can come up with, obviously, the better it is. And then I have them carry their positive statements around with them on cards in their pockets. Because a lot of times what happens is that people will find that they're walking down the street and all of a sudden, maybe they start to feel super anxious. Well, again, if your body is feeling bad, then that's because you have thought something bad. That doesn't happen by accident or through some ethereal process. You don't inhale anxiety and then feel that. It's because something's going on in your brain that you are reacting to. So when you start to feel that way, then you pull out your positive statements and you read them to yourself until you start to feel better. So we've talked a little bit about this before, but it's the difference between elevating the levels of oxytocin in your body or the levels of cortisol. So when you elevate the levels of oxytocin, your body's going to feel better. And when you put those positive self-statements in your brain, that is going to definitely raise your levels of oxytocin. When you feel anxious, that's because your levels of cortisol are going up, and that's in response to some negative process in your body, probably response to some negative self-statements. So the better that you get at identifying when this process is happening, when your body is feeling badly, and you choose to put those positive self-statements in your brain, you're going to make yourself feel better. Now, once we get good at that, we want to move on to the next stage, and that is I want you to put those messages in your brain all the time. So I want you to take responsibility for telling yourself good things about you. And I tell my clients this. You probably can find lots of people in the world who would say negative, bad things about you, even if they didn't know you. But it is hard to find a lot of people in the world, especially people who don't know you very well, that are going to say positive things about you. And so all of us need to take responsibility for putting positive messages in our brain. Now, maybe we were taught when we were growing up that if you think positive things about yourself, that's conceit and you shouldn't do that because nobody likes that. That's not very attractive. And I'm here to tell you that's a bunch of malarkey. If you don't take responsibility for putting positive statements in your brain, then don't be surprised when other people don't do it. So people are much more likely to try and cut you down than to build you up. You have to take responsibility for building yourself up. So I want people to be able to put those positive messages in their brains, but I want them to take responsibility for doing that consistently. So how do you do that consistently? Well, you've already got these statements in your pocket, right? They're written down on a card in your pocket. So I want you to take those statements out and I want you to read those to yourself at least 5 times a day. People say, oh my gosh, I couldn't possibly take something out. Well, you breathe more than 5 times a day, right? And I guarantee you that this doesn't take a tremendous amount of time. You can do this in the car. Now, am I saying that you should take your cards out and hold them in front of your face while you're driving? No, I'm not saying that. But eventually people start to get acclimated to these statements. You start to rehearse them enough that they become automatic. And you can repeat those to yourself in the car while you're driving, and it takes no time, and it's better than listening to the radio. Now, I'm not telling you to turn your radios off because I want you to listen to the radio, but it actually is something that you can do, and you can take responsibility for it. One of the things that I love, this is a hugely effective and incredibly powerful technique, is to take a wax pencil or lipstick and use a mirror so that you can write behind yourself and write "I'm a good person" on a mirror that you look at in the morning when you first wake up backwards, like ambulance is written on an ambulance backwards, so that when you see it in the mirror, it's right. When you look at yourself in that mirror and you see the reflection of those backwards written words, you're going to see in proper letters, "I'm a good person," with your face right there. That's an incredibly powerful technique that people can use to be able to get these positive messages in their brain. The more that you can work on putting those positive messages in your brain, the better that you're going to overwhelm the negative influence of all the negative stuff that people have told you throughout your life. The more that you can do that, the better it's going to be, the better you're going to feel. All right. So I am Dr. Michael Mahon. This is Psych with Mike. You can get us here again next week at 8 p.m. If you want to get me, you can reach me at Psych with Mike on Twitter. You can follow me at Psych with Mike on Facebook. You can go to my website, Michael Mahon, MichaelMahon.org. You can get my email address there. You can send me questions or comments. You can also podcast the show. I'm always encouraging people to podcast like the Dickens. Follow me on Twitter at Psych with Mike. Like the Facebook page at Psych with Mike. We'll see you guys next week, 8 p.m. Saturday night. It's Psych with Mike.
This is Psych with Mike.
At Royal Gate Dodge Chrysler Jeep Ram, they're setting the stage with their Drive and Discover event. Sign and drive a new 2017